So thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I'm Jennifer McCrory, the Director Curator at the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery, and I'm very pleased to be having an interview conversation with Sylvia Ziemann tonight as part of our In Conversation series. And so I'll be interviewing Sylvia about her exhibition, Keeping House at the End of the World. It's currently on display in our art gallery, as well as her practice. Although we're approaching the dialogue as an interview, I just wanted to mention that you are free to, please feel free to participate, jump in and ask questions or make comments by just unmuting yourself or typing in the chat if you feel more comfortable that way. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery is situated on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Nehewak, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. At the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery, we recognize that museums and art galleries are part of a colonial system where historically accepted colonialist narratives and agendas have been the foundations of these institutions. We are committed to decolonizing our institution by inviting Indigenous voices to lead, inform, and co-curate the direction and content of our programming and presentations of Indigenous art, history, and cultural narratives. So I'm very pleased to introduce Sylvia Ziemann to you. Sylvia Ziemann works in sculpture, painting, drawing, and puppet film. Her work explores our growing fear of the domestic other, our neighbors, and the creeping anxiety that our cocoons might be breached from without or within. Some work looks into the future of living spaces and how individuals might respond to environmental challenges caused by climate change, pandemics, and extreme conditions. Born in Edmonton, she earned a diploma in painting from the Alberta College of Art and Design in 1983 and a BFA from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design in 1986 and an MFA from the University of Regina in 2014. She currently teaches art at the University of Regina. So welcome, Sylvia. So Sylvia, it struck me the other day that this exhibition, Keeping House at the End of the World, could be referred to as a survey exhibition for you, since the work does span over a number of years, about 12 years. The earliest work is from 2010, which is Bunker Commune. And it also includes a new configuration of your MFA work, Carnival at the End of the World. Of course, all of the works, they dialogue really well together and inform each other. I was wondering if you could talk about when you started making work about apocalyptic scenarios and what inspired you in exploring an end of the world events.
Well, in terms of making art that was informed by sort of end of the world scenarios, I think I started after 9/11 happened. I think I woke up, that to the world as the dangerous, crazy place that it is. And also, I do have immigrant parents that came from Germany, and they went through the Depression era as children and as teenagers during the Second World War in Germany. And so I remember seeing pictures of the burned out buildings, and I also asked my mom to write out her story for me so that I could remember it, because she had some really crazy stories and some really beautiful ones too. And I think that was sort of the root that interested me in terms of disasters can happen, worlds can collapse, but those things also transform us, and that we can come through them, whether they're personal or global, we can come through them, and our lives can be changed in a positive way too, because of those struggles. And I also, because of the political tension around a lot of wars and different sides and that fighting, I found that I just wanted to find out the truth of what was going on in the world. And I didn't know how to do that, because every time I thought I had an opinion about something, there was an equal and opposite opinion going another way. And then also around this time, so I'm struggling with different points of view, but also I got really addicted to watching end of the world movies. So I just watched all of them and I thought, why are there so many end of the world movies? So I loved watching The Road, which was devastating, and the Book of Eli, where everything is gone, like all our technology, all the things we rely on in this world now. And but yet there's still a way to live and to find some cool way of existing in those devastated lands. So that intrigued me, and I was trying to put my finger on what is it. Maybe we have too much now, the world is too full, we have too much information. But if you have very little, then those smallest, tiniest things can be so precious, right? So I was really intrigued about how we ignore, if we have too much, we don't see the preciousness of certain things. But if things are devastated, then we're like, oh, I really have regrets. I really should have appreciated this. Or if someone, okay, now I'm going on a rant. One of those rants I was telling you about, Jennifer, you can cut
No,
me
it's all
off.
good.
Anyway, it was all balled up with the times, like the early 2000s, where I started to really become conscious of the impact the world was having on me, and how I could integrate that into my art practice. And it just started kind of coming out in the artwork just naturally.
Right. Yeah, it's focusing on the drawings right now, and I think it comes out in the drawings when you read them. How I love how you combine. You're sort of speaking to like global factors that are impacting you, but also personal. And there's a really nice blend of personal and global impacts, and how you're sort of trying to grapple with them. I just wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about anxiety being sort of this underlying, I don't know if you call it driver of your work, or something that you've spoken to through this work.
Yeah.
It's this one.
So when I'm working on the drawings, I'm sort of allowing myself to channel the stuff that's going on in my personal life and stuff that's going on in the world. So in this one in particular, um, I remember my mother was having some really hard digestive problems. She ended up in the hospital, and she's old, she's elderly, and there was that going on at the same time, and a lot of, I was having sort of the struggle between the idea of privilege and racism is there. And I have something, I can't remember what I wrote there, but I had to scribble it out because it was just too, um, it was too hard, So I just, these little bubbles right around the racism part. Um, and I think that around this time too, might have been when Colton Boushey had been murdered. And then on the right, there's sort of like an oil patch with a bunch of little sayings in there. Headaches, health conditions, that kind of thing, how we're impacted by the environment. So these drawings they're really loaded with these things that I can't articulate and I don't understand. I don't have any control over them either. I wish that I could stop the oil spills. Whenever there's an oil spill in the ocean or garbage or whatever, I mean, it breaks my heart so severely. And the only thing that takes care of that really is to draw it out and to think about it and really meditate on it in a sense. And then if there is something that I can do, I do that. But I think doing it through art opens up dialogue too about discussing things. But these are very much kind of therapy or poetic drawings, that poetic imagery that, or what do I call them?
Visual poems.
Yes, thank you. Visual
Yeah,
poems.
yeah.
Um, to try to understand. For me, it really is about understanding, because sometimes I have this feeling that if we could just understand each other and communicate properly, and this is a real idealist kind of thing, we could live in peace. We don't have to have war. We don't have to have, if we could, we're smart people, but for some reason, these things happen in the world. But then on a personal level too, you have, I, I was sitting with myself the other day, and I was going through all my friendships and my relatives and trying to find one person that I knew that didn't have a health issue or a crisis they were going through or was on medication for something. And I sat for a long time going through it's everybody that I know has some kind of personal thing going on. So I think my search is to just kind of discover kind of a common humanity with everybody, and myself included, that we're human and this is part of life, but that we're all going through something. And if we aren't, the world is going through something, and these are all worlds that end. And like Max, if if you get COVID, well, your world ends for, what did you say? I think 10 months. That's a long time to have everything come full stop. And I think that those are like little worlds ending. So I think there's those two spaces.
Right. Yeah, I loved the combination. I love the combination of imagery and text, and yeah, how you like I remember reading in one of them you had a to-do list, like things that errands that you had to do that day, and then there's like a fictional narrative that you're writing that speaks to something globally that's affecting you and or
Mm.
affecting all of us. And like I started thinking of these as your own personal game of exquisite corpse.
Oh, I
That
like that.
surrealist game where people keep adding an image and it becomes something absurd or
Yeah.
yeah, I just liked the idea of you sort of playing on your own and these images becoming constructed and building.
Well, I like,
Yeah, and
well,
sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Sylvia.
Well, the exquisite corpse idea, I like that. That's an awesome game. It really is. And it's great when you play it with people. There's one that I do sometimes in workshops with kids. It's the piece of paper where one person does the top of the body, and then you pass it to someone else, and they do the bottom of the body, and then you come up with a creature, right? Um, but it is, in a way, I think, a very kind of surrealist game, this way of drawing. And I think, well, the surrealists had the automatic drawing, and then they had um, the stream of consciousness drawing project too. Maybe that was part of that exquisite corpse. So I think it does directly kind of come from that, and allowing sort of access to your own unconscious. And I'm more of a Jungian than a Freudian, so I'm not thinking of the Freudian subconscious. I'm thinking of sort of the unconscious that we all have. So we get in information, we carry stuff with us, and there's stuff in there, stuff we don't even understand because we're complex creatures. But if you draw and you play, there's this thing that happens where things just kind of pour out of you. And I think I've gone to post-secondary art institutions for like 9.5 years, and I've gone through the programs, and I've been kind of molded and shaped in a way, but I've always gone back to this, I can't plan out an artwork. I can't go, okay, I'm gonna sit down today, I'm going to plan this out, and this is what I'm going to do. I can't do it. It's impossible for me. I have to play and move the paint around or move the drawing around and then see what happens. And it's a playful thing and it's fun, but it's also terrible because half of the time the work doesn't work out, or because you didn't plan it, right? It doesn't work out, or yeah, you just end up throwing a whole lot of stuff away, or you're waiting for inspiration, and which never comes. So it takes a long time. So it's a very much a process oriented practice, which isn't very practical. Um, but I think the drawings, because I have kind of a template of a body or a heart or, some part of the body, I use that as a format to contain that stream of consciousness kind of drawing. And that is actually kind of a form that helps control my work in a sense. Well, I'm not planning it out. I do have kind of a template to start with that keeps me contained.
Right. And were the drawings sort of the catalyst for the other works as well? Because you know, there's little you know, areas in animals, some of the creatures that you've created that show up in the drawings that then show up in the paintings. And I love how
But
the smaller
yeah,
paintings kind of isolate them and the larger paintings bring them together. But then
yeah,
they also end up in three-dimensional form in the dioramas as well. So it's kind of it's great how interconnected the works are.
well, that the monkey on this one, and I can't remember when I did this drawing. It was a few years ago that this monkey ends up in the Keeping House painting. Uh, and I don't know how it gravitated to that, but a lot of the images are, it's kind of like having a recurring dream. You have this figure that shows up again because it's still got something to say. Um, some of these little paintings here, I started off as little drawings, and then they accumulated, and then they ended up being in that really big painting. Um, and it had been a long time since I had done painting because I was doing miniature sculpture and drawing for a while. And so when I was working on that very large painting, the accidental Utopia, I had almost forgotten how to paint, even though I had painted for years. So doing the little ones kind of built up to the big one. They were almost like little practice pieces, and then they kind of just all came together all at once.
Right. Um, I see similarities in your work with the video work of Emily Atkins. And
Mm.
I'm thinking of the Prairie Fables that you both create and with animal characters. I'm just going to you know, that seem familiar from storybook book fables that we all know. You know, there's you have a painting of a girl in the red cloak, and you know, there's the wolves, and then in your case, there's lots of rabbits. But I've also picked up on references to maybe Alice in Wonderland, maybe just because of
Mm.
the rabbits. But what's interesting in your work and in Emily Atkins, even though you've got a sense that, you know, these are some fairy tale characters that maybe I have a sense of, you know, from fairy tales you've grown up with, none of the scenarios play out as you might expect. And so there's sort of this absurdism that
Mhm.
happens. And you've mentioned in a correspondence with me that you're creating a personal mythology, and I really love that idea. I was wondering if you could speak about that.
Okay, there are a lot of ideas in that one long question, but
Okay.
for this start, Emily Atkins, I love her work, and I think there's some affinity between her work and mine, of course, and uh, Diana Thornycroft and Marcel
Mhm.
Zaman, people like that, where we use creatures and kind of um, scenarios to reflect some other idea. And like in Emily Atkins' film, there's one of them. She's got her twins on roller skates in the prairie. I don't know if they're going down in a dirt road or something. But for me, when I was watching that, I was like, what are they doing? What is this? This is fascinating. I love this. What are they doing? Right. And I think that when you have that, and like here, these rabbits, what are they doing? you have, it takes you out of the literal quotidian life of, you know, doing laundry and whatever you're doing, you know, in your life. And it brings in that kind of mystery and magic, and especially that idea of the prairie Gothic, because we're here on this big prairie, and there are a lot of us making kind of weird stuff. And um, your other question was creating the mythology and the link with the fairy tales. When I was growing up, so I grew up with these German fairy tales, which were one of my favorite ones was Struwwelpeter, and it's a book of sort of lessons for kids and what not to do. So if you suck your thumb, I mean, they're brutal. They're like nasty. If you suck your thumb, this guy comes in with big scissors, you know, cut your thumbs off and you'll bleed, you know, and they got these little, drawing this little kid crying with the bleeding thumbs. And another one is a girl playing with matches and her dress catches on fire. And then somebody pours water on her. She ends up in a puddle. I think there's just her shoes there. And there's two cats crying, looking at the puddle. Like, they're weird, right? But as a kid, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, so don't play with matches, right? And it's not a good idea to suck your thumb. Not that I ever thought somebody would come in and actually, you know, do that. It's their metaphors to talk about their instruction fables, you know. Same with Hansel and Gretel, you know. Don't take candy from strangers. I mean, that's pretty basic. They might lock you up. And if you look at some of the stories in the news of, you know, those same ideas, it's kind of the dark side of human nature that's expressed in fairy tales and in mythologies. So I think the mythology that I'm creating is the place that I live, Saskatchewan, with everything that is, and my life here and the people that I know, but also how we're influenced by, you know, the World Wide Web. We're part of the globe now. We're part of everything that's happening everywhere, and we're not getting all the information. We're just getting snippets of things. But taking all that and turning that into kind of a representational mythology, so that you can have a playful kind of enchanted view of some human experience that isn't frightening. So even a child can come in and go, oh yeah. And in fact, at the opening, there was a woman with a little girl. She might have been about 5 or 7. And she was looking at the carnival and she's like, oh, what happened? This looks like so much fun, you know? And I explained that, well, you know, it was some creatures taking over a carnival site after a disaster. And she was just fascinated. Oh, look at the carrots, you know? So when that's easier to take than it is to turn on CNN and see something blow up and people running for their lives, you know, it's a different form of discussing those things.
Right, right. Yeah, I love that you brought up Prairie Gothic because, yeah, I was really thinking that your work, like Emily Atkins, and I love that you brought up Diana Thornycroft too. You know, like we exhibited her her herd series last year, and like
Yeah,
they are
yeah.
like weird and wonderful and macabre creatures. And yeah, her work really speaks to Prairie Gothic as well.
Mm.
So yeah. I also see nods to folk art in the work with just how you're taking you know sort of materials at hand you and creating different creatures like miniatures and the dioramas, the recreations of town life or urban apocalyptic scenarios. I was just wondering if you could talk about you know folk art as an influence on your work.
I like the honesty of folk art and outsider art a lot. It's probably my favorite kind of art because it's not informed by a how-to manual of sorts. It's people who are making work that is raw and from their life. And there's so much of it in the States, you know. a lot of people with mental illnesses or disabilities just making art. They never went to school, but they're making these beautiful, like they decorate their entire home with glass, or they, you know, they make stuff out of recycled materials, or they draw from their imagination, but they're not, I think that it's that working process that's very similar, where they don't really have a plan. They know they want to make something cool, or they find a piece of wood and it's like, oh, I can see something in that. I'm going to make a person out of that. And then I'm going to paint it. It's going to have purple hair or whatever. It's not something that is made for the gallery or for a sale even, really. It's something that is very rooted in kind of an honest creative space. Yeah. But no, I love outsider art. It's one of my favorite uh, mediums. Or
Yeah,
yeah.
great. Um, Now, Sandy Moore, in her essay for your exhibition, she's described you as the misfortune teller. And she's made references to tarot card reading, which you have done in the past, or you still do. And I was wondering if you could just speak about how maybe tarot card reading has informed your work, or if it has.
Yeah. Well, tarot reading it's an art form. It's such a cool thing. I'm not sure why everybody doesn't do it, because you know, we get stuck in our minds. I mean, I've been a tarot card reader, like seriously, for 40 years. I got my first deck in 1978, I think. And I was fascinated with them because they were images that seemed to hold some kind of magical mystery for me. But in working with them over all these years, I realized the thing that's the coolest about them is that it's pictures, it's imagery that you use spontaneously by asking a question. And the simplest reading is to shuffle the deck and ask a question and pull one card out. And you can do card readings with numerous cards, but you can have stuck in your mind a certain thing or a problem that you have, and you ask a question, you know, how can I address this problem? Or what's the best way to proceed here? Or what should I do? And you pull one card out. And what the card does is it's an image, so it kind of accesses your dream world or your unconscious, and it'll show you something that you hadn't thought of, but that you know is true. To some degree, it's an alternate way of doing the giving you an answer to your question, and it can shift your point of view. And I think visual art does that as well. It does that exact same thing. Although the tarot readings or the cards that you pull, they're random and spontaneous, so it's a surprise. But it would be similar to walking into an art gallery and seeing a painting and then being moved by that painting. And if the painting has a message, or the sculpture, whatever it is, then that also changes your mind. That's what art does. It changes your mind about how you see the world. It explains something in a visual way that's impacted, just like that. It's not a whole book. You don't have to read a whole lot of stuff. It's right there. And then you go, oh, and then you're drawn into it. Then maybe start thinking about it or talking about it. So I think there's similarities in reading artwork and reading tarot cards. It's very, very similar.
Very interesting. When you showed some of this work at the Art Gallery of Regina in 2018, in the exhibition Accidental Utopia, which then toured the province through OSAC, you were responding to, global crises or anxieties that at that time, things that we're still facing, like climate change and war and racism, that sort of thing. But we've since had a pandemic, and you've made some new works that speak to this period in time. I was wondering if you could talk about the newer works, and how they've maybe shifted, or has the work shifted
Well,
with the pandemic?
what was really weird about the pandemic was the prior to the pandemic, I had been making work about disasters and about pandemics and about war without being actually in that space. So when the pandemic hit, I thought, well, I've done work on that before, but now I'm in the pandemic. How do I make work in this? I don't know what, everything before that was kind of future seeing, or seeing things that had happened in the past and building on that. So here we are in a pandemic. Plus, I have to stay home because right away things were locked down and it was real, right? And but then I thought, I can't make art about this because I'm in it. And so I didn't make anything for a number of months. And then all of a sudden, just from talking with other people and what people were psychologically going through, my kids included, they were going nuts because they couldn't see their friends. They couldn't, you know, you know, share a joint together or whatever it is what they were doing, because their lives were just like, now you have to stay away from people. And all of a sudden I had all this new fodder for work. And so the quarantine diaries, the 5 little diorama pieces, that they just kind of evolved because I riffed off all the stories that people were telling about having anxiety, not being able to see friends, and how traumatic it was, and getting depressed, and all that heaviness, and then the anger, right? The anger, and then people protesting, the anti-maskers, and the yeah. And we lived at that time right beside the legislative building, and there was a protest. Yeah, there's my I can't remember what that one was called with the signs, but yeah, people
Protest at the end of the world?
protest at the end of the world. Yeah. So people are protesting everything and getting angry and getting into fights. And well, then there was the convoy. And so, yeah, the artwork just kind of did its own work, I mean, I had to make it, but it was there was information everywhere, fodder for making artwork around the pandemic, being in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to tell you that when we were installing your show and we had Bunker Commune, I'll just go back to Bunker Commune. This piece, from the Saskarts collection. This is the oldest piece in the show. So this is from 2010, and the woman that's on the video there, she's sort of barking out these orders, and she's saying, "Sneeze into your arm, make sure or wear your mask at all times." And it was spooky. It was really spooky because, I knew what year you made this piece. You made it 12 years ago, and it seemed like you had a premonition, for what we're going through right
Yeah.
now. And even it almost looks like a sort of a terrorist like looking like person comes in and says, "Don't listen to them. They're lying to you. There is no disease." Like it,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, spoke to everything that we're kind of going through right now.
Well,
Yeah.
and if you look at some of the I mean, I was watching a lot of movies at the time too. I'm a real movie nut. The movie Contagion is really could have been written during COVID.
Mm.
I don't know if you've seen that one, and they actually put it on Netflix when the pandemic started. And I remember I was watching it with my mom, and she thought that uh, that the movie was about what was going on now because it was so real. It was so contemporary. But that movie was made 20 years ago, I think, or something. Contagion.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but it's about a pandemic if you haven't seen it. But yeah, so I wanted to get, for this one, I wanted to get the feel that there's misinformation too. And that's how we get
Yeah.
conspiracy theories and all that, because often we don't have all the information. So you can have, well, yeah, that was 10 years ago. I can't believe I made that then. But even then, I was thinking of that as the representation of, yes, now you have to do this and this, but is it true? And that is what the anti-vaxxers and the vaxxers are fighting about. You know, they both have different information from different sides, but it's all incomplete. So then you have the fighting. You know, um,
Right.
yeah, it's all interesting stuff to me.
Yeah, yeah. Um, you referenced a quote from Margaret Atwood, and Sandy did as well in her essay. Within every utopia, there's a little dystopia, and within every dystopia is a little utopia. I was wondering if you could talk about that in relation to your work, and where does utopia come into play?
Well, I think, you know, one of the stories my mom told me during the Depression era was that nobody had any money. People had food stamps. You couldn't buy clothing. There wasn't anything. And she had one story where a farmer somehow managed to get them an egg, and they had an egg, and they hadn't seen an egg for a long time. So this egg became this beautiful, precious thing, and the family sat around it and decided, you know, well, should we fry it up? You know, should we boil it, or should we make a loaf of bread? Like, what should we do with this precious, beautiful egg? And I think even in the darkest of times, we can still find beauty and love, and can help each other, and that is in the human condition, you know. And I that was always kind of a lesson to me on the hardship that my mom experienced as a kid, but she doesn't talk about it as horrible time. It was like her stories are the memories of the good things. She obviously has, you know, horrible memories too, but I think and the thing that Margaret Atwood is talking about too, and in her books, she has dystopic worlds, but there's always some good in there. You know, there's always some way that you can carve out a space of beauty or friendship or things like that. And I think I in my thesis, I think I called my work Utopic Dystopias. So they're dystopias, but they're also utopic at the same time. It's not just a little bit, it's both. So in the big accidental utopia painting, you know, everything's been devastated, but people are rebuilding. It's a sunny day, there's birds flying, you know. Um, so I love that idea that even when things are not going well, and I mean, right now, you know, my husband just broke his legs, and you know, he's hobbling around here, and but he's got to, you know, he's painting. He's going, okay, this happened, um, and I find it's kind of for me anyway, it's a kind of a guiding force to find the really good, even though that there's all kinds of disasters everywhere.
Yeah, and I
Sandy?
think like especially a work like this piece
Mm,
really speaks to that where you know like you said people coming together to create some kind of community. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I think that plays out throughout the exhibition. You know, you can see people things where people are struggling, but when they come together, it's those glimpses of utopia.
Yeah, and we
Yeah,
have to help each other, you know, that's us humans, you know. The world is a better place when we do, because we can't always be
yeah.
strong and we can't always have things figured out. We need each other, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking Margaret Atwood. I saw some comment of on Facebook about how her fiction is coming true in some respects, or she's worried that is *Handmaid's Tale*. She made the comment, it's supposed to be fiction, with some of the reproductive right issues that are happening in
Oh
the
yeah.
States right now. Yeah.
Yeah. But she also says that everything that she writes has already happened once somewhere. So it's not entirely fiction. It's all based on true events in the past. So I thought that was interesting. I love listening to her talk. She's pretty smart.
So I'm just going to open it up to, I'm just going to stop share so we can see everybody, and ask if anybody has any questions or any comments. And if not, I was going to ask you, Sylvia, what are you going to be working on now? What directions do you see your work taking? I know you're very busy right now with caring for people, but when you get time in the studio.
Well, I told everybody tomorrow is my day in the studio, so don't bother me. Call me if you fall down, whoever you are. But I'm working in the studio. Well, I've worked this way for so many years, where I just kind of funnel whatever's going on, and I'm going to keep working that way. I'll still be working on the drawings. I may try different mediums. I'd like to work on just drawings for a while, because working in sculpture and painting, it takes up a lot of space, and it's all at your place right now. When it comes back, I'm not going to have much room. So I thought maybe I'll stick to drawing for a while. But anytime I have a plan like that, it doesn't work out. I'll be back making miniature stuff or something. But it'll be a response to whatever's coming up next, I'm sure.
Right. Right. Well, we're happy to take the work off your hands for a little while to make room in your studio, and we can enjoy it here. Yeah.
Belinda? Hey?
Yeah, I've got a few questions. I feel the same way when my work is going, and it feels weird to have it all back. But I think it was really great to go in and see your work in that space, because like the Moose Jaw show space is so nice because it's large, and we don't get much opportunity to have solo exhibitions where we can really spread out our work. So I really appreciate Jen providing that space for artists to have those solo exhibitions.
Yeah.
And you and I have our work has a lot of similarities, with animal themes, rabbits and stuff, but yet we're so different. And I was listening to you describe making work, even like the way you produce your work is different. Like I spend all my time like at work when I'm sometimes in meetings or driving between places or going to pick up artwork or install, like I'm thinking about things. So then when I'm in the studio, I know exactly what I want to produce. Whereas you're doing things in a different way, experimental, more fluid way, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's great. I think it's interesting how different artists can work. So is there new materials or different subject? Do you think the animals will always sort of have a role as the narrators in your work, which I sort of feel like they are, similar to my own work? Or are you moving away from that or changing that?
I have an urge to go figurative, but I'm not sure what that's going to look like. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. Every now and then I'll have a person in there rather than an animal, right? So there might be some transition that way in terms of subject matter. I'm not sure, and that would probably be mostly in painting. I've got some big canvases they're empty, and they're like, I don't know what's going to go on there yet. So we'll see what comes out. But I was a figurative painter, well, when I was in art school. So it's a lot of times things come around again and again. I don't know if you find that in your own work.
That's so funny, because I've been thinking about figurative work too. And I have a little paintings sketched up, and I haven't drawn a person since like when I went to U of S and did my undergraduate degree in English. I did a lot of life drawing. I had a nice life drawing group on Saturday mornings, and I loved working with the figure. But I haven't had it in any of my work at all, really.
Okay, here's
except
my
for family
another
work.
prediction.
But
Another prediction. The next new wave of art is going to be figurative. You should just put that on your calendar, and
Yeah.
maybe in a couple of years. Yeah. So start painting now.
It's very, I feel like figurative is really not marketable at all, so I'm not surprised that I'm interested to want to try.
Well,
Because animals are not everyone's cup of tea either. So
no, and you have to just make the work, if it's authentic to yourself, then maybe it'll sell, right? Like I don't have a lot of sales of my work, now and again, but I don't have a dealer. I make the art because I need to make it. I would love to be able to have a dealer and go that way. But I'm conflicted about it. I just want to make the work. It's a, I don't know.
I think that's the healthy focus. Like for me, it's just focus on making the art, because that's the part of an artist practice that you can control. Like often you can't control as an artist if you're going to get a show, if you're going to get a grant, if you're going to sell a work. All of those other things are really often out of your control, and then that can be very challenging and difficult. So to be able to just focus on making artwork, I think, is a really healthy way to keep your practice a good experience. Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing what you do.
All right. Stay tuned. Barbara, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. When you were talking about the dystopia, utopia, you said I'm inferred that you had said the task is to find the guiding force. Could you say some more about what you imagine or know as the guiding force?
Did I say the guiding force?
Yes. Wrote it down.
Oh, you did? Wow. See, that's something that just went right through me and came out like that.
I know. That's why I want to hear what you.
I think that there's a human element to us where we can, if we look for it, we can find the good or the wonderful or the beautiful or the magical in any situation. And I don't know, there was some quote that affected me a long time ago. I love quotes, but I have to admit that if you look for the good in someone, they will show that to you. And I'll talk to anybody. I'll talk to people that are the nastiest people, or even like people who are on the street and high. It doesn't matter. There's always, if you look for the good in whatever disaster it is, there's something there, and that might be a real idealist kind of point of view. But even I know in my own personal life, when things fall apart, I just look for, okay, well, what can I control and what's great? Oh, I can have a glass of wine. Let's do that now. Or just small kindnesses when people are having a hard time. Like I think that's a driving force. You can do that and make the world or the situation a little bit better and not worse,
So you've just said driving force, and before it was a guiding force. So that's interesting difference there.
Well, sometimes what guides us is what drives us, maybe.
It's true. And sometimes it's the opposite. We're driven to not take the guidance. So
Yeah.
I like thinking about those things. Thanks.
Amy put in the chat, Sylvia, the Galliano Island artist she was mentioning is Patty Moreland, and she sent an Instagram link for you.
Oh, okay. Okay, awesome. I'll write that down before I leave. Thank you.
Max.
I really love your use of color. I just have to say that. And it really jumped out, like everything that was, and I loved the presentation, how when you were talking, stuff kept flipping by and then flipping by again. And so every time it flipped by, I saw something different. So it was a bit like a kaleidoscope. But I really love your use of color. And I was wondering, like, is there any meaning to the colors that you pick? I'm sure there is, but
No.
I was just curious. You just intuitively pick them. They're beautiful.
Total intuition.
Right. Lots of life, even though you're talking about hard things. Lots of life.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know if I have like, I've always loved color. Like,
Me too.
it makes me happy, you know, and I love a garden full of flowers, like anything bright like that. I like it. I don't know. I feel it, right? And so when I'm painting, it's so much joy when I've got like a new color, or I mix something and it's like, oh, what is that color? Oh, you know, and I'll even cover an area, and then if it doesn't work out, I'll cover it with another color, you know, till I get the right feeling. But because one color beside another color. I teach this in painting too. You've got a color. If you put another color there, it changes that color because your eyes, you know, and color is just such a fabrication, you know, it's light, right? It's so weird. But
weird. It is
you turn out the light and it's gone. Where'd all the color go?
What's going on? I really, I can feel the joy, I think, because of how bright everything is. And it's just nice to see such life in things, especially when we're talking about such darkness. You know, I think that there's this sort of interplay between the subject matter and then the color. And I think it's a really nice friction. And I think there's, you know, it's that light, dark, overcoming the light, you know, light overcoming darkness.
Yeah.
I feel that when I look at some of the work.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I think the color is important because it gives that kind of joy and playfulness to those things, and that's again that guiding force or whatever I said that Barbara said I said.
I remember it. It was someone else's conversation, but I think you know, I think one thing that strikes me is just you're very intuitive, and you mentioned being a medium of sorts, and I do feel that sometimes when I'm looking at the work, especially at some of the more black and white images. I almost see them as you know, divining things, like looking at, you know, they have really kind of primal old ways of divining that are kind of like have to do with animal bodies, and it's kind of dark and nasty. But I mean, these animals have a hope in them, and they have a joy in them, even as they're telling stories. So it's really nice to see. I'm just really glad that I popped in.
Yeah, I'm glad you did too. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. It was really nice.
Are there any other questions or comments? Well, this was, yeah, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Yeah, and thanks Sylvia for sharing all your insights on your work. It was,
oh, thank you. This was
great to have a
really a lot of
conversation with you.
fun. And yeah, thanks you guys for all showing up. This is really awesome.
Anytime.
I'll just mention that Sylvia's exhibition is up until August 28th, and there is a catalog coming out. It's going to be a electronic catalog, yeah, I'm not sure if it'll be out by the end of this week or early next week, but we'll post about it on social media, and it'll be on our website. So, and it includes a grade 8 essay by Sandy Moore.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Okay, well, thanks everyone, yeah, hope to see you at the next one.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks.